Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome back to my Saturday Hodgepodge, my weekly wrap-up of all things bookish, reading, booktube, whatever the heck else I want to talk about. I thought I'd start off this week by actually talking about my reading week because I have actually made progress. Finished, well, by the time you see this, I will have finished 3 books, and hopefully then able to get to the other 2 of the 5 books which I put on my TBR, I think, for this month. So just kind of catch you up, I've made 0 progress on Jane Austen, A Life by Claire Tomlin, a biography of Jane Austen, which I was reading for Jane Austen July. Just haven't been able to get back to it and not all that enthusiastic about it. I also haven't read any more of Africa's World War by Gerard Prunier, which is a history of war and catastrophe that took place in sub-Saharan Central Africa after the Rwandan genocide. I've really been enjoying this, but other things this week have been more pressing issues, so I haven't read any of that. But on the positive side, I have finished 3 books this week. The first is Death Comes to Pemberley by P.D. James. I buddy read this with Kim from middle of the book march. This was our second buddy read together, and this one was even less successful than our first. We both agreed, I think, this is just a bad book. I don't know any other way to put it. I'm a fan of P.D. James's mystery novels. I've read a lot of P.D. James. I read this in the hope that it would be really clever and satisfying blend of what is obviously P.D. James' love of Jane Austen and Pride and Prejudice with her ability to write good mysteries. And to be honest with you, it's neither. So let me just ask you a question, and for those of you who haven't read this, and those of you who have, I guess, let me ask you a question. If you were going to set a murder mystery at Pemberley, the home of Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Darcy, née Elizabeth Bennet, if there's going to be a murder mystery and someone's going to be murdered on the property belonging to those 2 people, who would you, as an author, choose to act as the detective solving that crime? Just think for a minute. Which character, which would appear in this book, do you think would be most interesting to have, or most satisfying to have, be kind of the unprofessional sleuth detective who solves the crime? So I think your first choice should have been Elizabeth Bennet, and you would think that, Elizabeth Darcy, née Bennet. You would think that the Elizabeth Bennet character would play a large role in this book, and she is almost completely absent. If that doesn't convince you that this was just a wasted opportunity by P.D. James, then I don't know what else I can say. Elizabeth Bennet, one of the greatest characters in all of literature, one of the most beloved characters in all of literature, plays almost no role in solving a crime which takes place on her property. And she's almost entirely absent from the book. And we see her most often getting ready to go to bed, or being tired, or sleepy, or missing Darcy. That's mostly what she does, and that's incredibly disappointing all by itself. On top of that, there is a lot of there's much more Jane Austen fan fiction service here, with P.D. James coming up with stories that happen to the main characters and all the minor characters in Pride and Prejudice, and coming up with a story for them after that story ends. Some of those are good, some of those are bad, but there's just far too much of it, and a lot of it results in far too much retelling of Pride and Prejudice. I would think that most people who pick this book up to read it have read Pride and Prejudice. Maybe that's an unfair expectation of the author, but there's just a lot of repeating of Pride and Prejudice here. And then the mystery isn't really a mystery at all. With a murder mystery, when you read it, I'm not one of those people who tries to obsessively figure out, who did it all the time. But I do like to feel like that I'm being presented with reasonable clues, which might lead me to, figure out, if I concentrate, it might lead me to figure out who'd actually done the crime. That doesn't happen here. Instead, we get kind of a rehashing of the basic facts of the crime and the circumstance of the discovery of the crime, and the discovery of the primary suspect, who, surprise, surprise to Mr. Wickham, that story is retold, several times in the book, and then we find out that, something else is actually what happened. Just really disappointing. Both, as Jane Austen kind of retelling or fan fiction, and also as a mystery. This week I'll also finish Manhattan Transfer by John Dos Passos. Should be finished with this by the time you see this video, which will go up on Saturday. I'm buddy reading this with Fraser Simon from the channel Springboard Thought, and this has just been a really kind of enjoyable read for me. As I think I've said in all these videos this month, I reread the USA trilogy by John Dos Passos with Jack the Rambling Raconteur last year, and that was really great. I got to go back to what I think of as a really important classic work of American literature, modernist literature, and Manhattan Transfer is in many ways like clearly the precursor to that, and it's fun for me to see Dos Passos, hitting upon the style and the ideas that will become kind of the backbone of the USA trilogy. And this is also an incredibly enjoyable work from a modernist point of view, from some of the evocative writing that Dos Passos is capable of. For me, the greatest weakness of Dos Passos is his inability for me to create characters that I care about or that are memorable. What is most often memorable to me about Dos Passos' work is a sense of place and time, and feeling like you are really submerged in the world in which he's writing and bringing those places to life. He does that, I think, brings time and place and atmosphere to life much better than he does with people. This book is not as polished or as great as the USA trilogy, but it is very good and very interesting. And I'm not necessarily a Dos Passos campaigner here, but I do think he deserves to be read far more than he is, and Manhattan Transfer is a good place to start with Dos Passos. And then also, I've been participating in the Faulkner and August read-along this summer, which is the Summer of Snopes, reading the 3 novels that make up Faulkner-Snopes trilogy. The Hamlet was in June. We were reading The Town this month, and next month we'll be reading The Mansion in actually August for Faulkner and August. But I did finish up The Town this week, and I liked it. I think there are some really great Faulkner moments. There's, you'd see Faulkner's kind of dark, sarcastic sense of humor in the books. There's also real tragedy. There are all kinds of literary allusions, and I liked it. The last chapter feels like it's unnecessary. It contains racist depiction of Native Americans, which I think Faulkner does for a purpose. That doesn't excuse the depictions, but he's using them for a purpose, and it kind of mars the book to a certain extent. There were things in the Hamlet also that made it far less satisfying than it might have been. But I enjoyed it. I'm a Faulkner fan, and so I enjoyed it. But it was not perfect. And that reading The Town and having read all but just a few of Faulkner's novels. I haven't read The Wild Palms, I haven't read Pylon, and I think there's one more of his early kind of pre-Yoknapatawpha County novels that I haven't read. But having read a lot of Faulkner and then rereading The Town and The Hamlet, one of the things that jumped out at me, or one of the things that's been most interesting for me, I think, to be paying attention to, is where I think Faulkner kind of messes these novels up, as I alluded to in my discussion of The Town here. And that kind of led me to think about how rare it is, or maybe how we judge perfect novels. Like, how rare is it for a writer to write a novel that, let's say, his most devoted readers might, or their most devoted readers, their most devoted readers might think of as perfect. And so I thought I would talk about that, just for a minute, because I kind of am interested in hearing, what you guys might have to say. So let's just start off with the idea, or this is my idea, let me just start off with this idea, that perfect novel is a far more subjective classification than great novel or good novel. It's far more subjective even I think than 5-star novels are. I've read, I don't really do star rankings, but I've read a lot of novels I think are great that I don't necessarily think are perfect. And I have a lot of favorite writers who I still haven't found, or I don't believe they produced a perfect novel. So one of the things I think then that comes into kind of perfect novel and what makes it more subjective is that a lot of times, or at least I should say, what I believe is that to identify a perfect novel, it's specific to that writer, and therefore to be able to identify a novel that's perfect for a writer, you have to have read a lot of that writer's work. In most cases, I believe that to be true. So for me, having read almost all of Faulkner's novels, I feel like there are only maybe one perfect Faulkner novel, and that would be The Sound and the Fury. So what I mean by perfect here is within what the author's trying to accomplish, within the author's style, within the author's whole body of work, the novel which is most perfectly written, in which you don't feel like there's a word out of place, in which you feel like every page conveys and carries part of the story and adds subtlety, depth, understanding to what the story is about. And I think The Sound and the Fury is perfect in that regard. Now, a lot of really knowledgeable critics think that the greater of Faulkner's novel is Absalom. Absalom, I don't think that one's as perfect, in part because I think what Faulkner attempted to achieve in Absalom was much more difficult than what he attempted to achieve in The Sound and the Fury. But that's what I mean by a perfect novel. So I've read, I don't know how many it is, 12, 13, 14 Faulkner novels, and of all the novels he's read, I think there's only one which for me comes close to that idea of perfection, the perfect Faulkner novel. Now, to give you an example of an author who I've read much less, but I also think I've read their perfect novel, that would be Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. This is only my third Virginia Woolf book. I've read Room for One's Own and To the Lighthouse, which I liked both of those. But to me, this is just a perfect novel, full stop. Hard for me to imagine someone writing in the stream of consciousness style in a more effective way. Creating characters that you care about and you feel like you understand, and you get inside their heads and you understand their motivation, and writing beautiful scenes in very descriptive language and almost effortlessly moving from one person's thoughts to another. I just think it's brilliant. So I would call that a perfect novel, even though I'm violating my own rules about having read a lot of somebody's novels aside what's perfect. Beloved won't surprise you to know that I think Beloved is Morrison's perfect novel. Since it's Jane Austen July, I would say that Pride and Prejudice is probably Jane Austen's most perfect novel. And then just to kind of to include something it's not maybe what people think of as highbrow literature, even though they're wrong about that. Patrick O'Brien's second novel in the Aubrey Maturin series, Post Captain, I think is his most perfect novel. So this idea of perfection in a novel is one of those things that I'm kind of thinking about and working my way through. And so having mentioned some perfect novels, and if you watch my channel for a while, you realize that there are some authors missing from this list of perfect novels. For instance, Balzac. I can't think of a perfect Balzac novel. I enjoy Balzac a great deal, but there are none of his novels where I think, okay, this novel is perfect. Perfect in the sense that Pride and Prejudice or Beloved are perfect. I like them tremendously. I think he was a great writer. I still haven't found that kind of perfect Balzac novel, and I've read a lot. I would say the same thing about James Baldwin. I really like James Baldwin. I've read a lot less of Baldwin than I have of a lot of other writers. But as much as I like and admire Another Country, which is my favorite James Baldwin novel, I can see flaws that exist in it. There are sections which I don't think work as well as other sections. The same thing would be true for Giovanni's Room. Now, again, I'll remind you that this is, to my way of thinking, an incredibly subjective, personal list, that we all have our own favorite writers. But what I'm interested in hearing from you in the comment section, if you have a favorite writer, a writer you've read consistently, regardless of genre or anything else like that, if you'd like to, I'd like for you to list in the comment section below, a few of your novels you think are perfect. Just to kind of see what other people think, to see if I've read that novel, if I have the same idea, to find out new novels in new genres, or genres I don't normally read that people think are near perfect. Anyway, I just thought I would mention that because I thought that was interesting. And the last thing I want to talk about today has to do with a comment that I got of my video, which was a response to Steve Donahue's 10 booktubing tips. So I posted that video on Thursday. There'll be a link at the end. And I got a great comment from a commenter named KellyKellyKelly, who they don't make videos of their own, I checked out to see if they have a channel, but they have commented. She has commented on my channel, on some of my videos on my channel, and she wrote a comment on that video, which I thought fairly perfectly encapsulates, one of the things I enjoy about BookTube. And I think kind of the subtext of that video about BookTube tips was kind of me talking in a sense about what I enjoy about the creative process, about the interaction, and so I thought this comment was really perfect. And I'll try to leave it. Maybe I'll just superimpose it over my face. I hope Kelly doesn't mind me doing this. I enjoy watching the different generations and what they are reading and how they react to the same books I have loved or hated. I love the reactions from the patchwork quilt of generations, nationalities, sexual orientation, gender identity, religiously affiliated or non-believers, and the people who choose not to wear a label at all. As a child of 1967 and a true blue Gen Xer, I am learning from all of this. And that is a pretty perfect encapsulation of how, I feel about the BookTube experience. I love all those same things, and I appreciate Kelly's comment so much, or Kelly's comment so much, and I appreciate always the support from the commentators in our BookTube community. Anyway, there you go. There is my Saturday Hodgepodge for this week. I look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.